Do you know what my favourite thing is about Monster Hunter? No, it's not the cool looking dragons. No, it's not the really satisfying combat, and it's not even the weirdly high production value animations for eating some of the most bizarrely delicious looking food I've ever seen in a video game. No, my favourite thing about Monster Hunter is fighting one of its big mean beasties for the second time. See, your first fight against any given monster in Monster Hunter is likely to be a bit of a disaster. You won't have the right gear, you won't know the monster's moves, and you probably haven't gotten used to fighting in its preferred habitat yet. Sure, you might win, but it will probably be a bit sloppy, and you probably won't get all that many materials to show for it. But that all changes when it comes to a rematch. Suddenly, you'll have purpose-made gear to counter its attacks and exploit its weaknesses, you'll have wised up to all its tricks and know how to cripple it or chop bits off, and rather than being a hindrance, you'll be able to turn the environment to your advantage, luring the monster into traps, using the wildlife against it, or just killing the damn thing before it can retreat to its lair. All ending with you returning back to camp with a cart full of harvested parts that you can now use to make a cool new hat that will allow you to repeat the process all over again. All of this is a very long-winded way of saying that if there's one thing that Monster Hunter does better than any other game in the business, it is progression. No other title makes getting stronger, smarter, and better equipped feel better than in Monster Hunter. And some of my favourite moments in all of video gaming have come from the realisation that the big scary dinosaur I used to flee in terror from was now basically just a big pink piñata I could kill for fun, or that a world that once seemed scary and hostile is now something I know like the back of my hand. Progression in Monster Hunter feels great. So great, in fact, that it kind of got me thinking, why do vast swathes of the rest of the gaming industry have such a hard time making progression systems satisfying when Monster Hunter does it so easily? Well, it's a slightly more complex issue than you might imagine. Let me explain. Now more than ever before, video games are stuffed full of a seemingly limitless variety of progression systems. We've got EXP tracks, battle passes, leveling up, crafting mechanics, unlockable content, ranking systems, skill trees, gear grinds, achievements, quests, and whatever it is that's going on here. Basically, over the last, maybe 10 years or so, games have gotten way more interested in giving us a constant feeling of moving forwards, of always progressing towards something. And we can see it in everything from the obligatory grind of most modern online multiplayer games, to the entire roguelike genre reorienting itself around meta-progression gameplay loops, to the fact that almost every open world game is now also pulling double duty as an RPG. I mean, just look at Assassin's Creed Shadows. It being a quote-unquote back-to-basics take on the series that only has leveling up, a skill tree, and gear mechanics is a pretty clear sign of how priorities have shifted over the years. However, while I think gaming's recent fascination with progression mechanics and systems have had broadly a positive impact on design as a whole, I'm starting to worry that developers big and small alike may have, sort of forgotten what they're doing this all for. You shouldn't need me to tell you that there is an inherent, intuitive fun in seeing things progress. Everything from making numbers get bigger, to watching a building get constructed, to leveling up your fashion sense stat, brings with it a sense of investment, followed by satisfaction as we watch the progression resolve. It's our brain's way of rewarding us for putting in the effort and committing to a big project or some sort of personal growth, because that progress will eventually lead to a big, satisfying payoff. And just like with all other forms of fun, video games have evolved to induce this sensation through various methods, giving us things to progress through and means through which to observe that progress. But as games have gotten better and better at creating engrossing progression systems and have developed ever more ways of showing us that progress, I think they've forgotten why we enjoy this stuff in the first place. The fundamental appeal of progression doesn't come from EXP tracks and lists of chores, it comes from us having done something or changed in some way that we feel matters. And as a result, it's often the games with the fewest actual progression systems that give us the best, most satisfying progression journeys. And it's the titles that have the most obvious obsession with having as many bars to fill up and levels to grind as possible that lose this sense of deeper fulfillment beneath a sea of superficially engaging slop. How many times in a game have you gotten into this sort of fugue state of going and doing some daily quests to get some crafting materials that let you make a thing that will let you do a bit more damage so that you can get a currency slightly more efficiently that will earn you some points towards something that you can spend on... Wait, what was I doing this all for again? Basically, what I'm saying is that by now, video games have gotten pretty good at making progression systems that are entertaining and give us a good time in the moment. But what most games still seem to struggle with is making progression systems that provide a more fulfilling sense of accomplishment that only a few games really seem to have cracked, and that Monster Hunter has been doing for 2 decades. And it seems like the increasingly obvious answer to the problem is not to add yet more progression mechanics. And, even worse than disappointment, these sorts of progression journeys that end up feeling more like progression treadmills also end up robbing us of the much more meaningful contentment of your effort and investment feeling worthwhile, and the satisfaction of seeing just how far you've come that games with actually good progression mechanics do so well. All this begs the question of what the secret ingredient to making a satisfying progression system actually is. Because, let's be real here, it's not like Monster Hunter's gameplay loop is that different from any other loop-based action RPG, but where in Monster Hunter I have a visceral attachment to the Arcus Lance that carried me through the toughest sections of my very first Monster Hunter game, Monster Hunter Tri, and an equally visceral fear of this one-shotting bastard in Monster Hunter World, I feel nothing for the legendary gear I pick up, use, and then sell for pocket change in Diablo 4, and I forget about its bosses just as fast, even though both games appear to have quite a similar progression structure. So what gives? Well, after a lot of soul-searching and a lot of playing a fun video game for entirely work-related purposes if the tax people come asking, I think I've come up with at least some kind of idea. I think the secret to a satisfying progression system is that progress can never be its own reward. If viewed merely as an arbitrary journey with no endpoint, it's impossible to actually take pride and develop a bond with anything we do in a game. But by showing us the fruits of our labour, giving us tangible goals to shoot for, and getting us to appreciate how much we've changed or how far we've come, games can turn progress from a mere functional part of game design into a rewarding highlight all of its own. And there are a few ways that games can do this. 3 to be precise. Games can create visible in-game milestones that we can use as a constant marker of our progress, they can encourage us to and reward us for progressing by getting us to challenge our mastery, and they can demonstrate that the effort we've put into a game and the progress we've made is worthwhile through permanent mementos and reminders of how far we've come. Helpfully, this acronym is easy to remember because it's also the noise I make whenever I look at any of the food in Monster Hunter. Anyway, let's begin by talking about what I mean by a milestone. A milestone, just like in real life, is a fixed point in a game's design that we as players can use to gauge how far we've come, and in doing so, clearly demonstrate our progression in an easy to quantify way, allowing us to take satisfaction in our journey where otherwise it will be quite difficult to get a grasp on how much we've grown. One of my favourite examples of this in action can be seen in the survival games Abiotic Factor and Grounded, which happens to contain giant spiders, so quick arachnophobia warning until this timestamp. The early stages of both games are defined by the terrifying presence of a bad guy who utterly outclasses you to start with, but can eventually be overcome, namely spiders and security bots respectively. In the first few hours of each game, you'll spend most of your time running away from these enemies and cowering in your little base from them at night, because they are way too tough to try and fight when you're just getting started. But eventually, as you progress further and further, you'll have the amazing sudden realization that at some point you actually surpass these enemies and that you can not only fight them, but you don't have to be afraid of them anymore. This milestone moment feels great because the memory of these guys being an overwhelming, terrifying threat is still fresh in our minds, and beating them is incontrovertible proof that you progress past these static obstacles, and thus through the game as a whole. This is the importance of progression milestones as a fixed point that we can compare ourselves to. So many challenges and obstacles in games, particularly in ones where you're constantly getting stronger and improving in skill, are either only ever experienced once or grow alongside you in an effort to maintain a constant level of challenge. But what this means is that it can be very easy to lose sight of where you were and where you're going, making the progression itself less rewarding. This is why leveling up and getting new gear in, say, a Bethesda game or any MMO with heavy level scaling is often not that exciting past the initial thrill of the sparkly graphics and getting a new toy to play with. Your relative power is going to be more or less exactly the same because the bad guys are just going to get proportionally stronger to match whatever increase in power you attain. In Guild Wars 2 or Destiny or Starfield, you can play through the whole campaign gradually getting stronger and then go back to the very first zone and you'll take more or less exactly as long to kill the enemies and take about as much damage as you did at the very start of the game, regardless of your fancy new gear and your level being an order of magnitude higher. You've definitely advanced, all the numbers are much bigger and you're probably way better at the game, but with no tangible proof, it's hard to feel that way. By comparison, games with less reactive progression systems can actually engender a greater feeling of accomplishment by allowing you to completely exceed certain obstacles. A reason why many Vampire Survivors knockoffs have been unable to dethrone the champ is because they take the easy way out when it comes to balance, and just have all the enemies scale to the player's level directly instead of having discrete foes with fixed stats. What this means is that while the pretenders to the throne have much smoother difficulty curves, the exponential increases in power that serve as the bedrock of the genre's appeal are much harder to perceive because you're still fighting the same enemies and taking around as long to kill them throughout the entire game, and so you feel more like you're treading water as opposed to getting gradually stronger. This is in contrast to Vampire Survivors, where frequently boss-type enemies like this praying mantis guy get gradually demoted into regular fodder as you get stronger, giving you this great, clear demonstration of how much more powerful you are now. As you might expect, Monster Hunter does the same thing. Every monster in the game has a fixed level of power and danger, meaning that over time you'll gradually eclipse monsters that used to be a real threat, contributing to this great feeling of mastering the ecosystem. Actually, one really cool thing that older Monster Hunter games did that the new ones frustratingly don't do as much is to ambush new players with a tough mid-game monster that they can never possibly fight during an otherwise peaceful tutorial mission. This has literally no other purpose than to scare the absolute fucking bejesus out of you, because it sets up a cool rivalry for the inevitable strength-proving rematch. That said, milestones obviously aren't always combat related. Getting new abilities or unlocking new content can also be a great way of giving you this nice obvious evidence that you can now do things and go places that you couldn't before, and that your relationship with the world has changed as a result of your continued forward momentum. There's very little that feels as good in a factory game as getting some brand new piece of logistical equipment that lets you totally redesign your factory. In Satisfactory, the move from biomass generators, which have to be manually topped up and always conk out on you at the worst possible time, to coal power, which is orders of magnitude more efficient and can be fully automated, is nothing short of transcendental, and you're left marveling at all this free time you've now suddenly got to do things other than cutting down trees. Equally, in Super Metroid, the game makes a real point of presenting the world as strange, hostile, and difficult to navigate when you first start descending into the bowels of Zebes, often locking the door behind you so you've got no idea where you actually are. Also, towards the mid-game, it can surprise you by looping you right back around to the start, except now, you're armed to the teeth, leading to this great moment of discovery where you can finally piece together the map in your head and understand how to navigate it, in stark contrast to when you first arrived and it was all rainy and you had no idea where to go. This leads me on to the idea that progress in games isn't entirely something that's appreciated in retrospect. Milestones are great for demonstrating to us how far we've come and giving us something to celebrate surpassing, but good progression systems also need to be aspirational. This is where mastery challenges come in. By providing us with regular chances to push ourselves and visible goals to shoot for, games can not only drive our forward momentum, but give us immediate, tangible ways to prove to ourselves that we're more skillful and more knowledgeable than we were before. A really great example of this is ascension mechanics in roguelikes, stuff like Hades' Pact of Punishment or Balatro's Extra Stakes. Rather than your increasing skill and knowledge being entirely abstract, these systems provide concrete proof that you are indeed actually getting better at the game as you beat each tier, making your skill progression feel way better because it can be broken down into distinct, actionable goals, rather than this nebulous feeling of being better at the game, but not in any way that really matters because the difficulty is the same. The end-of-level graphs in a problem-solving game like a Zachtronics title work the same way. Completing the level itself is often a good enough incentive to master the game, but these graphs show us that my janky, cobbled-together bodge-job solution is far from optimal and could be improved, giving you a clear goal to progress towards and tangible feedback with every step you take, which feels much better than having to make the assessment yourself. Mastery challenges don't have to be skill-based either. Part of the reason why Discovery games feel so rewarding to progress through is because they're comprised of several knowledge-based tests of your mastery that lead to even more questions and even more riddles to solve, meaning that you never get the chance to feel complacent or lose track of your progress because each step of advancement conceptually builds on the ones that came before it. Like how in Outer Wilds, the mystery of this explosion you first see at the start of each loop will eventually lead you all the way to the bottom of Giant's Deep, building on your understanding and your appreciation of your growing mastery with every step. Relatedly, it's crucial for games to provide us with mastery challenges that feel earned and actually reflect our growth as a player. Beating a challenge that doesn't require you to push yourself or improve in some way won't feel anywhere near as good as one that does, because you've not actually progressed in a way that matters. Getting 3 rando moons that you can basically nab by accident in Mario Odyssey feels way worse than getting the triple moon for beating the final challenge, because even though the rewards and the progress they grant are essentially equivalent, the context behind them is different. Only one demanded you grow your skills, and so only that one served as a satisfying capstone to a progression journey. This lack of meaningful context is also why so many incremental games, which are usually all in on progress being the fundamental source of enjoyment, often fall flat. Sure, watching a number go up is fun, but without some sort of goal to shoot for that affects some sort of tangible change, any increases in the number of blimbos you're scribbling per second quickly become meaningless. But in something like Universal Paperclips, the Norp Apolog, or the Longing, you're always moving towards some sort of tangible goal or trying to avoid a negative threshold, which helps massively to ground all these exponentially increasing numbers in a context you can actually appreciate. Optional challenge rewards are also a great example of what I'm on about here. In something like Celeste, the strawberries, which are collectibles that require doing some funky bonus platforming or puzzle solving to get, exist not just as something extra to do once you've beaten the game, but also as an excuse to stretch yourself to your limits and, more often than not, surprise yourself. Nabbing a strawberry in Celeste, or a letter in Tony Hawk, or one of these red rings in Sonic serves as a goal to shoot for beyond just being the level, allowing for players who are at different stages of their own progression journey to still feel like they're doing something that matters and that is testing them in a meaningful way. Monster Hunter, predictably, has the best implementation of this I've ever seen. Fighting a monster normally is usually hard enough, but for players looking to push themselves, or experts looking to flex their skills, you can get more rewards and kill monsters faster by knowing which body parts to cripple and what their hidden weaknesses are, whilst also being good enough to capitalise on that knowledge. When you first fight this lightning railgun bastard, Ray Dow, you'll have a hard enough time just dodging his attacks, which makes successfully taking advantage of the weak point that appears on his face just after he tries to blast you, or lopping off his tail, which requires some well-aimed attacks, feel so good, because it's something that you simply weren't able to do before, and now you have proof that you can. And it's this idea of proof that I think informs the third secret ingredient of a fun progression system, which is in many ways the most important. A strong progression system is about making the work you put in feel like it matters, and that's why creating mementos, which is to say actual objects or rewards or changes in the world, to reflect that progression in a way that exists beyond your brain, can serve to ground the effort you've invested in a tangible sense of time and place, making it that much easier to hold in your mind and appreciate the scale of. The progression from a tiny hovel to a mighty self-sufficient castle in any survival or building game is so much more meaningful and rewarding than the parallel increase in equipment strength, because only one is represented physically in the game world, and serves as a constant testament to your work. And any progression that can be represented externally functions the same way. Achievements, special cosmetics, and, actual trophies for doing stuff can all be great rewards for progress, even if they serve no real purpose, because they're reminders of the journey you took to get them and an eternal digital representation of your progress. But they are only the tip of the iceberg. The more obvious and the more personal an external reminder of progress is, the better it can serve as the emotional payoff to a progression journey. In Wonder Stop, a not quite cozy game all about making tea, my favourite part of the game was filling up the tea shop with a bunch of pictures and trinkets from all the customers, like these stupid presentation slides from these coffee-loving business guys. And in the new Zelda games, the hero's journey mode is this great way of putting into perspective the crazy trip you've been on. And it's great fun to look back and think, oh yeah, that's where I died a bunch. Nostalgia has smoothed over my frustration and turned it into a pleasant memory. Monster Hunter even does this in two separate ways. First, more obviously, in the form of your gear, where you literally wear weapons and armor made out of the chopped up bits of your former foes, turning you into a walking victory trophy. But it also uses this kind of design in the fights themselves. In Monster Hunter, each creature changes behaviour as the fight progresses. Early on, they'll be sizing you up and probing around, then once you've pissed them off, they'll finally start being more aggressive and bringing out their scariest moves, before finally getting worn down and desperate as they near defeat. The sight of a previously terrifying monster literally limping away from you with its tail between its legs or somewhere on the floor nearby is such a clear way of showcasing the arc of the fight and your progression through it, that very few games ever use. Monster Hunter even showcases this arc through its environments. Early on in a fight, you'll duke it out in the open where there'll be lots of room to maneuver and endemic life to use to your advantage, but as the monster retreats, it will run away to areas where the terrain favours it, ending in the monster's lair, where it can bring out its most deadly attacks in tight quarters in a last-ditch attempt to finish you off. But beyond just enemies reacting to you when you hit them with a sword a bunch of times, mementos can take many forms, and so long as they serve as a ludonarrative acknowledgement of all your efforts, they can be a much more powerful mark of pride than something that only exists in our heads. Take the increasingly popular genre of work simulator games. Stuff like Power Sim, Unpacking, Hard Space Shipbreaker, Truck Sim, etc. A large part of the appeal of these games isn't anything that happens in the moment, but the pride and satisfaction of a hard day's work that comes with looking at the results of your labour and being able to see it in the context of all the effort it took to get there. Having to clean up a whole fire station or chop up a big old spaceship is difficult, often mentally taxing work. But that all makes the feeling of looking back and seeing the fruits of your labour in comparison to where you started feel that much better, because their final state, the end of this particular journey of progression, is living proof of your progress. Even in something like the hour-long joke game A Game About Digging a Hole, which, yes, is exactly what it says on the tin, there's something very affirming about looking at your massive subterranean tunnel network and knowing that 50 minutes ago it was nothing but a tiny ditch in the bare earth, and it wouldn't feel anywhere near the same if there weren't a permanent physical reminder of all the effort you put in. And really, That's the essence of why progression is fun. It's not about immediate emotional or tactile feedback, it's about seeing that all the effort that we put into improving or advancing in some way actually paid off and manifested in a way that matters. It's not important whether we measure our progress relative to what we've passed, what we're shooting towards, or what changes we've made, so long as we can actually measure it. And it's that satisfying feeling of a job well done at the end of a progression journey that serves as our psychological payoff for investing effort into doing something we care about. And I think it's this that explains why so many games struggle to have compelling progression systems in the first place, even when they appear to do everything right. The more progression systems a game has, and the more complex and convoluted they are, yeah, the more playtime it can get out of us, and the easier it is to hook into the brain's primitive dopamine-seeking reward pathways. But in designing progression systems this way, games sacrifice the essential tangibility and immediate emotional investment that comes from more visible, comprehensible forms of progress, the kind that can provide a longer-term, more nuanced sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. In all those games with a million currencies and timers and things to level up, you never stop progressing. But equally, it's incredibly difficult to appreciate how far you've progressed and what that means in the wider context of your relationship with the game. And, perhaps more fundamentally, the real thing that defines basically all the best and most fulfilling progression systems is that you eventually stop progressing. It's only once you've reached the end of a journey, beaten the final challenge, scaled the highest peak, that you can truly take stock and internalize what it took to get there. And unfortunately, this idea is fundamentally at odds with the financial and design pressures of modern game development. It's very easy to hook people into an infinite treadmill, and people will happily fork over their life savings for the privilege of staying on it, strung along with the promise of an emotional payoff that will never actually come. Just look at any game that's trying to milk you for playtime or cash. They're almost always stuffed full of progression systems that are aimed at constantly keeping your brain active, but never actually provide any sense that you've really gone anywhere, any meaningful goals, or any indication that the work you've put in actually amounted to anything more than progress on a different part of the same metastatic progression cancer. Sadly, designing a progression arc that is actually capable of following through and making it feel like all the work you put in was worth it is way harder than just cheaping out. Because when you get right down to it, video games kind of don't matter, and so tricking us into thinking they do takes a lot of skill. And it's this psychological trick that makes me appreciate Monster Hunter as much as I do. Every inch of the series is laser focused on not just giving you things to progress and upgrade and get better at, but constantly giving you evidence of this progress as well. And whether it's deliberate or not, that's why Monster Hunter, in spite of its repetitive grinds and at times wonky difficulty, remains so compelling. Because with every dragon you fail to get a gem from, and with every stupid giant pickle lizard that barges in and spoils your hunt, you always feel like your effort is, eventually, going to be rewarded. And that's what a satisfying feeling of progression is ultimately all about. So, the next time you feel yourself getting sucked into a progression loop and are wondering whether it's going to be worth your time, take a second to work out whether you can spot some sort of destination on the horizon, and also if you can see how far you've come. Because without that information in hand, chances are you're probably not progressing at all. Which is totally different to me not being able to find a goddamn Guardian Rathalos plate because I'm just about to get one right now. I mean, right now. Which is to say, right now. Okay, this one. For real this time. Come on, give it to me. Hello, and welcome to this, the After the Video segment, brought to you by my fractured elbow, which delayed this fucking video by about a week. Turns out it's hard to do much of anything to do with video games when you sort of can't move one arm. Ow. Anyway, I'm feeling better now, and it's time for me to tell you all about some cool internet people that you should be made aware of. And this time, it's Doc Burford, a games writer and someone who worked on the very good Adios, Hardspace Shipbreaker, and Paratopic, who's put out some of the best and, in my opinion, most unfairly underappreciated games writing of the last few years. Mostly because it's all in text form, but trust me, every single one of his essays is more than worth reading. Doc's written stuff on the reason why the violent nature of games is so hard to shake, why walking sims as a genre mostly died off, when game developers should listen to fans, hint never, why cozy games as a movement are often not actually cozy at all, and a whole bunch of other stuff surrounding the intersection of writing and storytelling in games with how we interpret games as cultural artifacts. Doc is funny, insightful, and draws from a deep well of both artistic and professional experience. Please do give his stuff a read. It's great. But do you know what else is great? It's those cool people who decided to support the channel via Patreon or YouTube memberships. These things take a hell of a long time to put together, and let me tell you, YouTube would much rather I was putting out an endless barrage of shorts, or manipulative, whiny, video gaming has been ruined by politics garbage, and so it means a lot that all you people are generous enough to support something that's aiming a little bit higher, even if I can't help myself from dragging the tone right back down with loads of stupid jokes. Anyway, if my sycophantic praise, by the way, did you do something new with your hair? It looks great, wasn't enough, people who choose to support the channel also get earlier access to episodes, behind the scenes looks, bonus game design goodness that I wasn't able to fit into this video, and even their names in the credits. Look, there they are, off they go. Lots of lovely people who are much more attractive than the average YouTube comment freeloader peasants. Sorry. And if you donate $10 a month on Patreon, you'll even get to join my illustrious list of mysterious benefactors, who are Ali Wright, Andrew Labrano, Auna94, Bobby, Bodybuilding Baboon Barber Bob, Brian Notariani, Constantine Amend, Cosmix360, Daniel Metjes, Dirk Jan Karambeld, Digletier? Is that how you pronounce that? Who fucking knows? Dis Ellie, Ecton, Edward Franklin Woods, Edwina the Space Bun, Eric Walston, Eugene Bulkin, Fulibaxi, Furious Hulk, Gazkul, Heck It's Noah, Jacob Dylan Riddle, Jinkaloid, Kevin Help Us, Konolov, Kangi, Luke Kokoran, Mace154, Maxim Filipov, Marika Vladalina Altair, Mark Vallant, May Contain Fox-Like Substance, Mika Oi, Michael C., Mike Oxlong, Nate Graff, Oliver Marhofer, Patrick Romberg, Peter Tomasik, Reddit Regal Regex, Seslux, Silver Fulfi, Steam Rollerman, Tyler Duncan, Timotea Shebekzek, I hope that's how I pronounce that, Whimsical Wisp, Zach Brantmeyer, and ciao. Okay, that's it from me. Bye!